All right, so think about this for a sec. Back in the early 1900s, tons of books hit the shelves, right? But guess what? Most of them, well, they just disappeared. Total flops. It kind of makes you wonder, like, what does it really take for a book to not just survive, but become, a huge global hit that people still read decades later?
It's true. I mean, it really makes you appreciate those books that buck the trend. And that's what we're diving into today. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Okay, so we're talking 1937, right when it first came out.
Yep. And since then, over 10 million copies sold, translations in 36 languages. You just don't see those numbers often.
Especially not nearly a century later. I mean, it's not like this is some fad diet book. People are still reading it, studying it, actually using its advice. That says something, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It speaks to some pretty deep stuff about how we humans interact. Dorothy Carnegie, Dale's wife, she called it a finely made tool. You keep refining it, but the core is solid and it just works.
Okay, so that's what we're going to unpack today. How to actually make this book work for you, the listener. Because we're talking about some seriously useful stuff here.
For sure. We're going to look at how to boost your influence, how to handle those sticky situations, how to become a better conversationalist, even how to get people fired up about things.
Oh, the good stuff.
Exactly. And this isn't some ivory tower stuff either. I mean, the book itself came from, like, real-world experience. Carnegie was teaching public speaking to adults.
Public speaking, huh? I can see how that connects.
Well, he noticed that a lot of his students, they wanted to be better speakers, but they were struggling with even more basic stuff, like how to just connect with people on a day-to-day basis.
Interesting.
And Carnegie admitted he had the same struggles earlier in his life. He even said he wished he'd had a book like his own back then.
So it wasn't just his opinion, right? Didn't they do some huge survey to figure this out?
Oh, yeah. The University of Chicago and the YMCA schools teamed up for this massive project. 2 years, $25,000, which back then was a lot of money.
Seriously, what did they do?
They picked this town, Meriden, Connecticut, considered kind of like the average American town.
Yeah.
And they asked almost every single adult in the town a whole bunch of questions.
Like what kind of questions?
Oh, everything. Their jobs, their education, what they did for fun, how much money they made, their dreams, their problems, the whole 9 yards.
It sounds exhausting.
Right. But here's the kicker. After health, the thing people were most interested in, other people. Figuring out how to understand them, get along with them, be liked, even influence their thinking.
Makes sense. So knowing this, the folks running the survey, I must have been looking for a good textbook, right? Something to teach all this.
Oh, yeah. But guess what? They couldn't find a single practical one. One expert even said flat out, the book they need has never been written. Talk about a gap in the market.
Wow. So Carnegie steps in to fill that void. And that's where we come in, right? We're going to break down those core ideas, see how they can actually help you, the listener, navigate this whole human relations thing.
Exactly. So let's jump right in with a principle that might seem kind of, counterintuitive at first. Don't criticize. Carnegie argues that it's often pointless and can even backfire.
So he uses this pretty wild example. Two-Gun Crowley, the gangster. This guy, he's holed up in his apartment, cops everywhere, he's bleeding from gunshot wounds, and what's he doing? Writing a letter saying he's got a kind heart.
I know, right? It's almost comical. But the thing is, it's not just criminals who do this. It's human nature to want to justify our actions, even when we're dead wrong.
Makes you think twice about trying to win arguments by putting people down.
Definitely. Carnegie even talks about John Wanamaker, the department store guy. He realized one day that criticizing people was just plain foolish.
Foolish? Why?
Well, Wanamaker said he had enough problems trying to fix his own flaws. He didn't need to waste time on other people's.
Makes sense. I guess it ties into that whole thing about how we crave approval but hate being judged.
Right. Psychologist Hans Selye said it best. As much as we thirst for approval, we dread condemnation. And criticism, even if you mean well, it often feels like, condemnation.
Not exactly a recipe for positive change.
Nope. Carnegie tells this story about George B. Johnston, a safety guy at a construction site. At first, whenever he saw workers without their hard hats, he'd just bark orders, lay down the law.
Did it work?
Kind of. People would put their hats on, but as soon as he was gone, off they came again.
So what did he do?
He changed tactics. Instead of criticizing, he'd ask if their hats were uncomfortable or didn't fit right. Then he'd gently remind them why the hats were important.
Smart.
And guess what? People started wearing their hard hats more often. without all the resentment.
That's a good point. It's not about being right. It's about getting the result you want.
Exactly. And think about, like, big historical figures. Teddy Roosevelt and President Taft, they had this huge falling out. Roosevelt went after Taft hard, criticizing everything he did.
So did Taft change his mind?
Nope. He just dug in his heels, even cried about it, saying he couldn't have done anything differently. Roosevelt's criticism didn't persuade him. It just made him defensive.
Wow. So even someone like Lincoln, he had trouble with this, didn't he?
He did. After Gettysburg, he was super frustrated with General Meade for not chasing the Confederates harder. He even wrote this super harsh letter.
Did he send it?
Seems like he didn't.
Oh.
It's like he realized, over time, that ripping people apart doesn't really get you what you want. He needed to keep those relationships intact, keep morale up.
Interesting. And then there's that story Father Forgets. It always gets to me.
Oh, yeah. So sad.
The dad sees his son sleeping and regrets all the little criticisms he threw at him that day. Messy clothes, bad table manners, not washing his face well enough.
Heartbreaking.
Eh.
He realizes he was holding his son to adult standards, expecting too much.
And that's something we all do, right? Criticize without really seeing things from the other person's point of view.
We do. So Carnegie's first big point, think before you criticize. It might not be worth it.
Good advice. So what's next?
Okay, principle number 2. Give honest and sincere appreciation. Carnegie says that at our core, we humans, we crave feeling important.
I can see that. He uses that story about the farmer with the prize-winning hogs, right?
Yep. The hogs didn't care about the ribbons, but the farmer, he was bursting with pride.
It was about him feeling important.
Exactly. And it's not just farmers. Think about Lincoln. What drove him to study all those law books?
He wanted to be somebody.
Right. That need to feel significant, it's powerful. Carnegie even suggests that some folks, they get so desperate for that feeling, they can lose touch with reality.
Really?
Yeah. He points out how many people were in mental institutions back then and tells this sad story about a woman who basically created this whole fantasy life where she was Lady Smith, married to some British aristocrat.
Wow. So instead of tearing people down with criticism, we should build them up with appreciation.
Exactly. He talks about John D. Rockefeller. One of his partners lost $1 million on a deal.
Ouch. What did Rockefeller do?
Yell at him. Nope. He focused on the positive. He said, well, at least you saved 60% of the capital. It's all about shifting the focus.
I like that. It reminds me of that quote, "There is nothing I need so much as nourishment for my self-esteem."
That's a good one. We feed people all the time, but what about feeding their self-worth?
We forget to do that.
We do. And appreciation, it can have a huge ripple effect. Remember Paul Harvey's The Rest of the Story about Stevie Wonder?
Yeah, I loved those.
Well, there was one about a teacher who noticed little Stevie Morris, who was blind, had amazing hearing. That teacher, she really appreciated that gift. Who knows how much that impacted him, becoming Stevie Wonder.
Powerful stuff.
It is. Carnegie says appreciation is legal tender that all souls enjoy. We should all be leaving a trail of little sparks of gratitude wherever we go.
Beautiful way to put it. I also love that story he tells about Emerson and his son trying to move the calf.
Oh yeah, they're pushing a pole and trying to make it do what they want.
But it's the housemaid who figures it out.
Exactly. She understood what the calf wanted, to suckle.
Mm.
So she uses that to gently lead it. It's like Harry Overstreet said, action springs out of what we fundamentally desire. First, arouse in the other person an eager want.
We're getting into some seriously deep territory here.
We are, and it leads right into another principle. To influence people. Talk about what they want. Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate, he only had 4 years of formal education, but he knew how to get things done.
He was a people person.
He was. And he focused on what others desired. Carnegie contrasts this with a fundraising letter that starts with Dear Uncle Andrew, which, come on, who wants to read that?
No one.
Right. Then there's Barbara Anderson. She wrote to banks in Phoenix and said, here's how I can help you.
Much better.
Way better. And she got interviews with almost every bank. It's about their needs, not yours.
So how do you figure out what people want?
Sometimes it's obvious. Like that story about Mike and the station manager.
What happened there?
Mike wanted the manager to fix up his station. But no amount of talking could convince him. Then Mike showed him the competition station, all shiny and new.
Appeal to the ego a little bit.
Exactly. And suddenly, the manager was on board. He wanted his station to be the best.
Makes sense. So instead of saying, hey, want to play basketball, I should say, hey, want to get some exercise and have some fun with friends.
That's the idea. It's all about framing it in terms of what they get out of it.
Even if it's the same thing in the end?
Right, and it applies to everything, even writing. This tough-talking editor told some fiction writers, if you want to write good stories, you got to be interested in people.
That's true for real life, too.
Absolutely. Think about Howard Thurston, the magician. He was super successful, not just because he was good at magic, but because he genuinely cared about his audience.
He saw them as people, not just like marks.
Right. He wanted to give them a good show, and they loved him for it.
Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. You got to be interested in people to get them to do what you want.
Exactly. Edward Sykes, he was a salesman, and he kept a big account just by being nice to the clerks at the store.
Really?
Yeah. He acknowledged them, made them feel important. It made a difference.
Makes you think. And what about the story of the Kaiser and the little boy?
Oh, that's a powerful one. So the Kaiser, after World War I, everyone hated him. But this little boy, he wrote him a letter, just pure admiration.
Fan letter.
Basically. And the Kaiser, he was so touched, he invited the boy and his mom to meet him. And you know what? He ended up marrying the boy's mom.
No way.
Oh.
All from a little letter.
It shows you how much even powerful people crave genuine connection.
Yeah.
Even the Duke of Windsor, he learned Spanish before touring South America.
To impress them?
To connect with them, show them respect. It's the little things.
Like that story about the bank teller, Marie.
Oh, yeah. Mrs. Rosedale. She loved Marie. Not just because she was efficient, but because she asked about her sick mother.
Human touch.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Charles Walters, he got a meeting with a client by knowing about his son's stamp collection.
You got to do your research.
You do. And Naufel, the fuel salesman, he won over a tough executive by asking for advice on a debate.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Well, it's more than that. It's about making people feel like their knowledge matters. Like that story about the student nurse who spent Thanksgiving with a scared kid in the hospital.
Just being there for him. Okay, so principle number 3.
This one's simple. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language.
Names are powerful. Carnegie talks about Jim Farley, right? The guy who helped FDR get elected.
Farley, he was a master at remembering names. Not just names, but details about people, their families, their jobs, what they like to do. And he'd always follow up with a personalized letter.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It was. Before FDR even started campaigning, Farley was writing hundreds of letters a day. Then he'd travel, meet tons of people, and when he got back, he'd get lists of everyone he met so he could write them all letters.
Great.
I know, right? But it worked. People felt seen. Carnegie also talks about this public speaking class in Paris. This American banker, he got furious because they spelled his name wrong on a form.
We've all been there.
We have. And Sid Levy, he told this story about Nicodemus Papadoulos, who had lived in America for 15 years.
Yeah.
Everyone called him Nick.
But not Sid.
Nope. He called him Nicodemus Papadoulos. And the guy was so touched. That little bit of respect meant the world to him.
Even FDR, he understood this. He was always sending out autographed photos and thank you notes.
Smart. Make people feel special.
Oh.
Okay, moving on to principle number 4. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. It's the ultimate compliment.
It really is. I love that story about the dinner party where Carnegie barely said a word all night, just listened to this botanist go on and on.
And the botanist thought he was the most fascinating conversationalist. Jack Woodford said, "Few human beings are proof against the implied flattery of rapt attention."
We love to talk about ourselves.
We do. And it's not just about being quiet. It's about active listening. Like Dr. Eliot, he didn't just listen with his ears, but with his eyes, too. He was completely present.
Fully engaged.
Yep. And remember Robert and his wife, Mrs. Esposito.
What about them?
He said he knew she loved him because she always listened when he wanted to talk.
Sweet. So listening builds connection.
It does. It also calms people down.
Yeah.
The New York Telephone Company, they had this policy for dealing with angry customers. Just let them rant.
Let them get it all out.
Exactly. And it worked. The customer would calm down and they could solve the problem. Same thing happened to Mr. Detmer.
What did he do?
He had this customer who refused to pay his bill. But instead of arguing, he just listened to the guy's complaints. The guy ended up paying, and he placed a bigger order later, all because Detmer listened.
Wow. So listening can actually be profitable.
It can. And this office boy, he taught himself by reading biographies and then writing to famous people, asking them about their lives.
So he was using listening to learn.
Exactly. And he got responses from people like General Garfield and General Grant. They were happy to talk about themselves. Same with that New York lawyer William Lyon Phelps knew.
What did he do?
He talked to young Phelps for ages about boats, even though he wasn't interested in them. He did it because he knew Phelps loved boats.
That's kind.
It is. And this bread salesman, he finally got a big order from a hotel after 4 years by asking the steward about the owner's interests.
He finally figured it out.
He did. And Edward Harriman, he wanted to work for this guy, R.J. Funkhauser. So what did he do?
He asked for a job.
Nope. He talked about how he could make Funkhauser more money. And it worked. He got the job and stayed there for 20 years.
So principle number 5.
Talk in terms of the other person's interests. It's about finding common ground, showing you get them.
We've already talked about appreciation. Ronald Rowland, he had this shy student, Chris.
What did he do?
He invited him to the advanced crafts class, made him feel good enough to be there. It's about seeing potential in people.
It is. And that story about the woman who gave away her Packard.
Why did she do that?
Because the guy who got it, Mr. R, he really appreciated nice things. She knew he'd take care of it.
Sentimental value.
Exactly. And the judge who gave away a puppy.
What happened there?
The guy who got it, he was genuinely interested in the judge's hobbies and accomplishments. The judge felt appreciated.
It pays to be nice.
It does. Even George Eastman, the Kodak guy, he loved it when people admired his office.
Everyone likes a little praise.
Everyone. And Paulette, the restaurant worker who wanted to quit. Her manager stopped her by appreciating her work, making her feel valuable.
Smart manager.
Right. Disraeli said it best. Talk to people about themselves, and they will listen for hours.
So true. And the final principle, number 6.
Make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. This isn't about fake flattery. It's about genuine recognition.
So let's recap. Carnegie says there are 6 ways to make people like you. Be genuinely interested. Smile. Remember names. Be a good listener. Talk in terms of their interests, and make them feel important sincerely.
And these principles, they might seem simple, but they're really about a major shift in thinking. It's about putting the other person first, understanding their point of view.
So for you, the listener, why is this important? It's not just about being likable. It's about having more influence, building better relationships, having a more fulfilling life, both personally and professionally.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So here's something to think about. Which of these principles really speaks to you right now? And what's one small thing you can do today to use it? What might change in your relationships if you focused on making others feel truly seen and valued?